My name's Mark Stephen. I'm going to be chairing today's event. Welcome to our 10th annual Scot-Secure Summit. It is an utterly miserable day outside. I have to say what a real pleasure it is to see people coming in, dripping gently on the floor, just praying it's rain. Can I just ask you, make sure all mobile phones or electronic devices are switched to silent before we continue. You passed the toilets already. They're on the second floor, just above. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if one goes off, it is for real. Go and stand outside, but please don't wander off. We need to be able to count heads, which today is going to take a wee while. All catering will take place in the Stratosphere upstairs, and if you are using the car park downstairs, you can get a reduced rate of £6 by talking to one of the Digit team upstairs. We've got some excellent speakers for you today. I'm looking forward to a fairly lively conference. We'll be finished by about 3:15 this afternoon. It is packed between now and then. Just to set the scene and tell us of some of the other conferences that are coming up, can you please welcome to the stage the founder of Digit, Ray Buck.
Good morning. Yes, 10 years, and this handsome chap has chaired all 10. So big round of applause for the chair. Can anybody claim to have been at all 10 from the audience? I know you have, Lawrence. Come to the opening of an envelope. Good to see you, though. Yes, 10 years. First one, 2015, quiet, about half the size of this, not a lot of cyber people, mainly business leaders, whoever we could get to come. And it has grown arms and legs, largely down to the support of you, the people that have come, the stakeholder map that we have, people like the Cyber and Fraud Centre, Harry and Stu from Cyber Scotland Connect, a number of the educational institutions have supported over the years, including today, so we're very, very grateful for that. And I think it's also a good opportunity to thank the team that's behind this from my end, particularly Pete and Jill, who've been with us through all 10 of those. Pete creates our agendas, creates our narrative, puts a great panel together for you to listen to over the day, and Jill's our event manager, who should be cloned. She's amazing. So thank you to the team as well. And of course, our editorial team, business development and marketing, and everybody else that brings all this together. So yes, year 10, and we will be here again, don't forget, in Glasgow for Glasgow Scot-Secure on the 11th of September, but we'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. A good opportunity to thank our sponsors. These events are free to attend. If you work in an operational or an end user capacity, you'll never pay to attend a Digit event, whichever one it is. They're always free. So we get funded by our sponsors and exhibitors. Please afford them a couple of minutes of your time today. Our headline sponsors, BlackBerry, our co-sponsors, SentinelOne, Boxy, ThreatLocker, Sonic Wall, and Cyber Vigilance, and partners. And at the end of the day, HPE Aruba will be hosting a free drinks reception. And then there's something else happening after that, which I'll come on to in a second. Future events we're going to be doing. Am I on the right slide? Yes, I am. Our next event after this one will be Digit Expo West. A number of you will have been to our expo, which we hold in Edinburgh annually. That's been going now. This year is year 6, but we only had a very small contingent from Glasgow attending that. How many people are here from Glasgow today? See, about 6 or 7% maybe. That's reflective upon obviously Expo as well. So Glasgow, they need their own events. We do Scot-Secure in Glasgow. We're going to be doing Expo in Glasgow, May the 29th, around 1,200 people, 50 exhibitors, 5 different stages, a whole host of different themes running through that one. Please do come along. If you can't come, get your colleagues to come as well. Also in June, our inaugural ESG Innovation Summit. IT spits out a lot of carbon. How does that get reduced? How can we be smarter with it? How can we reduce the carbon output? How can we be a bit more lean and agile within the IT estate? That's something, and we'll also be focusing on other technologies which obviously help to the green economy. That's here on the 20th of June, and we'll be sending you details and drip feeding through all the other events over the year as and when they go live. We've got a wonderful conference app, Eventify. It's a native app. Download it, use it. There's the QR code. If you haven't got time to scan it now, upstairs on the poster board, you can scan it. You can network. You can see the agenda. You can choose what you're going to do over the day. You can read a bit more about our exhibitors. Everything you expect to find in one of those wasteful conference brochures. We've now got it online. And at the end of the day, after everything finishes here, the Three Sisters pub will be hosting Cybersecurity Is No Joke, an evening of comedy hosted by Cyber Vigilance and a number of their partners. I think we've got about 100 registered for that. That kicks off straight after here, so you can sort of finish your bottle of beer or your glass of wine or whatever you're drinking at the drinks reception, then trundle up the road and start all over again. That will be hosted by them, free food, free drink, but you do have to go up to the Cyber Vigilance stand and register if you wish to attend. I think there's only a handful of places left. Last but by no means least, as you'll know at these events, there's always a number of our exhibitors that are drawing you in with some really sexy prizes. Today is no exception. I'm not going to tell you who is giving away what, so you're going to have to walk around and find out who's giving away what. An Atari game system, bit retro, a 2600 plus game system. Star Wars Lego, it's called an ornithopter. There's a few people nodding, they know what I'm talking about. A remarkable tablet, Sonos speakers, Apple AirPods Pro, McLaren Lego, there's an Echo Dot, there's a Tesla, which you've probably seen, the little battery-powered Tesla, which can fit a small child in. That's also a raffle. That's not getting drawn until Expo West, though, on the 29th of May. £150 worth of Amazon vouchers, Kawasaki Lego, and there's also an Easter egg competition and guess the sweets in the jar. So there's a number of things, a bit of fun on the side as well, and some incentives to walk up to the stands, go have a walk around, enter the competitions, and a number of those will actually be drawn during the drinks reception. So I think most of these we will draw during the drinks reception and give the prizes away this afternoon. Over to the interesting people. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. We can't do it without you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Ray. Right, this opening session is going to be looking at how we improve the way we detect and actually respond to threats. So our first speaker this morning is Sonia Kumar, Global Head of Cyber Defence for Element. And what Sonia's going to be talking about is how events from the past can help inform how we react in the future. So, Sonia.
All right, thank you, Mark, for that introduction. Before I carry on, let's see if this works. All right, so good morning, everybody. If you know that song and even the UK TV programme that it came from, Come and See Me for a Jelly Baby later on, well done to you. Thank you to the team for inviting me here today. The reason that I accepted is because I really want to talk to you about the things that I've learned from being part of teams that have responded to severe cyber attacks and incidents. Now, no one really cares about me, really, but the reason that I put that slide up there is because the things that I'm going to talk to you about are the things that I wished somebody had talked to me about along my career journey at any point. So hopefully you will all take something away, whether you're very technical, whether you're a strategist, whether you're a senior executive or in sales. I hope you will take one or two things away from me today. I'm going to try my best to inject a little bit of fun along the way, so get involved. And then the other thing for me to say is my chart hit of learnings are not necessarily ranked. I could have talked about this all day. I would suggest they're all equally as important as each other. So, right, what we're going to start with. All right, panic on the streets of London. Now, make a mental note, make a note of either the band or the artist that goes along with the song, because we will go through those at the end, and you can get more jelly babies. All right, So panic on the streets of London, what is that about really? Well, that's about clear command structure during an incident. And this is all true, right? So I remember it was one Friday the 13th, many years ago, pre-COVID times, and I got a call about 5 o'clock in the morning asking me to go into the office. All I knew was there was a ransomware attack. So I went in, got onto the video conference call, global organization, and it was utter chaos, to be quite honest. I couldn't understand what was going on. My job was to lead the global cyber defense incident management capability. There were so many people on the call. I had to ask people to leave, particularly senior people, which was quite awkward, a bit butt-clenchy. And it just seemed like everybody wanted to know everything at the same time. So for me, managing stakeholders and comms at the start of an incident really is key to successful incident management. And that really comes down to making sure your organization, no matter how small or big, has some kind of incident response plan. And what I would suggest as well, for large federated organizations, you might want to think about having an overarching policy for your entities to follow. Do not wait for an incident to work out how the group is going to be notified, under what criteria, who will take primacy, all those things. You need to sort those things out in advance. Now, it's all very well me saying this, because you all know this. Everyone says, yeah, you've got to have an IR plan, you've got to have a policy, but how do you actually go about doing it? I remember in Vodafone, my cybersecurity director, I've got a couple of pals from Vodafone here today, then who I'm talking about, she asked me, she said, Sonia, I want you to go and write a policy, a global policy and a global incident response plan. Now, being polite, I was like a rabbit in the headlights. So what did I do that I think would be useful for you in terms of how you go about devising an IR plan? Well, use your network, right? Use people here, particularly those in your sector. What is it they did? Are they willing to share and give you advice? And the likelihood is the answer is going to be yes. The other approach that I used was like a school project or a university project, right? So I did a lot of research to see what was out there. I looked at credible organizations in terms of the advice that they were giving. There's a lot of really great IR plan templates out there that will help you structure your plan, some better than others. But really, one thing of value for me was talking to the UK National Cybersecurity Centre. I had contacts with the UK NCSC through the role that I was doing at the time. And you'll be surprised at how willing people want you to, or how much they want you to succeed. So they gave me some really good tips, which I'll go through now with you. So one of the first things they said, it seems obvious, maybe now, but it wasn't at the time. They said to me, like, you want a risk matrix. You need to understand how to initiate the appropriate response to whatever situation you're dealing with. So in other words, what severity is the incident? So you're looking at risk and impact, but you're looking at potential risk and impact as well. What might that situation evolve into? So you're going to, in your risk matrix, you're going to consider factors like critical systems, account privileges, reputational factor, financial and revenue, regulatory, right? All those kind of things. Now, for me and some of the others, and a couple of people sitting here, severity for us is measured by business and customer impact. And the highest severity category might be, for example, a significant data breach or loss of service to customers or internally. The other thing that I did as well, and I'm doing now actually, is if you can, get your external and internal legal counsel to get eyes on your draft plan. And that can be really helpful for investigations that need to be conducted under legal privilege, because you might not think that will happen, but it probably will one day. And it really puts good focus on compliance as well. Then, again, do not wait for an incident. You know, I've been guilty of this. Do not wait for an incident to agree who's going to do what, particularly those teams that you work closely with. So agree in advance a RACI. Again, it sounds obvious, right? But people don't do it. So agree a RACI, don't wait for the incident, and tie in any relevant policies, for example, from privacy or wider organizational crisis management plans, or anything you want really, into your IR plan. And I mentioned comms earlier. Honestly, it's so important. If you can get those right at the start and during an incident, it will help. So have a comms plan. In your IR plan, have some kind of citation to how comms are going to work. Who's going to report upwards? How will that work? Who is going to be responsible for prepared comms to the media, to investors, to significant customers? What if internal services are down? How are you going to communicate with your colleagues and employees? What are you going to say? And then really, if you have the ability to, my advice would be to onboard a public relations firm, particularly for large enterprises, because you might need them one day. Now, I've said all that. That's brilliant. Have an IR plan, do this, do that. We're in Scotland. So just making reference to 1786 Robert Burns' poem, even the best laid plans can change. So you do all that, then you might throw it out in the window, all right, from my experience. So what have we got next? All right, Town Called Malice. Most of you should know which band that is. That's about the insider threat. So for the number of years that I've been part of incidents or teams that have been part and responded to incidents, that threat is not going to go away. I've seen continuous malicious insider activity. So I'm going to give you a case example. This is quite a good one, I think, because it's a cyber attack from malicious insider activity, but also through the supply chain as well. Happened a number of years ago as well. It was a third-party supplier. We'll just call them Supplier A. Their contract was due to terminate on a particular date. It was the 31st of March, not relevant really. But we opened the incident 18 days later on the 18th of April of a particular year. Now, what happened? There was a software application that supported customer ordering and processing, and it completely shut down. So it was having an impact to business and revenue. We couldn't find the root cause of the shutdown. We couldn't restart the application. Because there were continual shutdown requests being made from somewhere, and it was from a high-privileged account that no one seemed to know about, which was less than ideal. Now, the software involved was Oracle software, and actually we contacted them, and they were really, really helpful, and they attributed the events to the exploitation of a year-old vulnerability. So we looked at, well, I didn't look at the logs because I can't do that. But so the team looked at various logs, system logs, firewall logs, all that good stuff. And they really couldn't see much apart from these continual shutdown requests. What we did find, though, was a site-to-site VPN that we didn't know about. And it transpired that Supplier A had stood up that VPN 6 years previously when they'd helped us to build the environment. So there's a big lesson learned there. And it should have been severed on termination of contract as well, and it hadn't been. In the meantime, Oracle had come back to revise their initial assessment to say, actually, we don't think exploitation of that vulnerability is the root cause. So we were kind of back to square one. And what we did was we expanded the scope of our forensic investigation. We took a whole bunch of containment actions, right, that you would all know about. We disabled various accounts. We created new ones. We put them into heightened monitoring. We'd severed the VPN connection. We did all that good stuff. But what is it we learned? Well, it was a deliberate and malicious act from a Supplier A employee. They had made the shutdown requests. We evidenced the fact that they'd accessed the impacted environment about 10 minutes before the first shutdown. There were about 2,000 unauthorized attempts from Supplier A accounts to try and connect to production systems. There was a whole bunch of stuff, process violations that we found, bypass of privileged access management. There was the use of the VPN. We also found a test account that we hadn't been made aware of that Supplier A had created, and they should have disclosed as part of contractual obligations. Their passwords were frankly rubbish. They were not complex, they were weak. And actually there was a big lack of cooperation from Supplier A as well. Now, on reflection, that's probably due to the fact they were maybe worried about litigation or whatever, but they really weren't willing to help us with our investigation very much. But Oracle were. They were amazing at the time. So lots of things there for you to go and think about in terms of your relationships with Supplier A, and also on termination of contract, the things that you should be checking. Good, all right. Don't speak. People tell me that quite often. Don't speak. All right, so everybody here, you've probably all received a dodgy phone call, a spam email, a dodgy text, a dodgy WhatsApp, whatever it is. And I bet some of you have engaged with the person on the other side and thought it was quite funny, because I've done it. Or if you've not done it, you really wanted to do it. When it comes to the workplace, don't do it, right? Don't do it. And through cyber awareness training or any other mechanisms you've got, make sure people in your organization don't do it either. So again, learnings, right? What have I seen that I wish I'd kind of known about before? So one example to start with was a fairly straightforward case of C-suite WhatsApp person impersonation. And if you don't know what that is, it's when someone, a threat actor, pretends to be a CEO or a CFO and tries to get something from someone. So in this particular case, the recipient, who was a colleague of mine, not a close colleague, just for those of you who work with me, they were a recipient of mine. They were also in a very senior position. They knew that the WhatsApp that they'd received wasn't the threat actor, so they thought it'd be funny to start to engage. What that unfortunately led to was a very inappropriate conversation, and what that led to was a bunch of action being taken against them. So if you think about it, in the UK, we talk about the Daily Mail test. You know, be careful, because if that threat actor had chosen or somebody chooses to publicize details of a funny conversation that you're having which turns inappropriate, it can cause significant harm to the reputation of the organization, right? So really, I see it quite often. It's a learning. Take it back. Now, in terms of ransomware attacks and other extortion attempts, absolutely do not engage. I was at a conference, and maybe some of you remember, it was in Scotland last year. And there was a CEO, excuse me, of an enterprise, and they were talking about a ransomware attack that they'd suffered in Scotland. And basically, they talked about how they'd engaged with the threat actor. You know, until that attack, nobody had thought about what they might do in that scenario. That poor CEO, you know, the teams had not advised them on what to do in the event of that kind of situation. So they did what they thought was the right thing to do, but it absolutely wasn't. So my advice, and again from what I've seen and what I do, is get the professionals in. So get them in before you need them. There are negotiators out there who will help your organization deal not only with cyber attacks, but other scenarios, if they're applicable, like kidnap of high-value targets, right? There'll be some of you who work for organizations where that might happen. And those negotiators won't only buy you time, which is probably one of the primary objectives, but they will help with attribution. Now, why is that important? Why could that be important? Well, if your organization is considering paying the ransom, we'll touch on that in a minute, then those negotiators will perform what we call compliance checks, and what that will do is mitigate sanctions risk, because there is sanctions risk from paying a ransom in some countries, as you may or may not know. So that leads me on to paying the ransom. Now, I'm not here to tell you whether or not you should or your organization shouldn't pay the ransom, but I think whatever the position is, it needs to be made really clear amongst certain people. So definitely the board need to know, and also chosen senior leadership. So in the event of a ransomware attack, decisions could be made quickly. And in advance, right, who in the organization has the authority to say whether the ransom is going to be paid? What are the insurance implications? Think about that now. What is the sanctions risk? We talked about that. And what about your corporate and social responsibility? What will your customers, shareholders, and investors think? So all good things to think about. Now, if you do suffer from a ransomware attack or any attack where the threat actor has stolen data, think about how you may devalue that data. And there is an incident in the public domain. You can read about this. It was in 2020. I was part of the Vodafone Group team, and someone had stolen part of a customer database for one of our low-cost subsidiaries in Italy called HoMobile, ho.mobile. And within that database, I mean, it wasn't ideal, really. There was personal data for customers. There were first names, last names, phone numbers, email addresses, places of birth, nationalities, addresses, the full works, really, and SIM-related information. And the threat actor was offering all that data for sale across a number of dark web forums. So for us in the team at the time, the main objective was to protect our customers, always to protect the customers. So after careful consideration, what we did, we decided to go very public with the incident, which is why you can read about it. And what that led to was the stolen data essentially being too hot to handle. So it's like a burglar, right? They take a whole bunch of stuff and it becomes too hot, they can't sell it. So nobody on the dark web forums wanted to have anything to do with that stolen data or that threat actor. And basically, they all became worthless, right? Which was to our benefit. We still had the incident to deal with, but it was sort of one step closer to protecting our customers. So don't speak, plan in advance, don't engage, and leave it to the professionals is my advice and my learnings. All right, it's really hard for me not to sing the title of these songs. All right, so at number 2 then, let's get physical. Exercising, so tabletop exercising your board. For me, this is one of the best things you can do for getting cyber into the minds of the board and for it being for your benefit. It gets them thinking about whether they're investing enough into cybersecurity. Now, it doesn't matter, again, how big or small your organization is and where it is on the cybersecurity maturity journey. I really recommend you try and do this. I was going to say as much as you can, but like once a year would be quite good. Now, you can do this with other teams, but I'm talking specifically about the board. And I've been very fortunate to be given the opportunity to tabletop many boards. And first, I know it's hard, but we have to think that members of the board are human beings. They are people. And those exercises will help them think about how they, as a team, can respond to a severe cyber attack or a crisis, because they don't know unless you help them. What role will each one of them play? It will help them with identifying preferred behaviours, strengths and challenges, and believe it or not, the CEO might not always be the best person to lead through a cyber crisis or a severe incident. And then one thing to note, again, I think a good learning, when you're trying to get buy-in for exercising the board or senior executives, do not use the word test. They don't like it. When I talk to board members, I talk to them about measuring our readiness to respond to a cyber attack, identifying gaps, and hopefully trying to close those gaps and reduce risk, right? They're all about reducing risk. So cyber attack scenarios, it needs to be relevant to the business and challenging. I've seen some scenarios that are too easy. There's no point in making them easy. You want to stretch your board. You can bring in outside help if you have the ability to do that. But from my own experience, those inside the business and who know the business best should be designing those scenarios or at least contributing heavily towards their design. You can also hire a full-time person to take charge of your cyber preparedness and readiness as well, which I've done before. Make sure each board member has the opportunity to contribute to the exercise, so design your scenario injects that focus on each one of their business areas, because there's nothing worse than seeing half a team of people who don't have anything to say, so get them all involved. And in terms of what your scenario might consider, whatever you want, whatever's a hot topic, whatever you want to bring attention to, some of the things that I've done, bringing attention to the organizational crisis-wide management policy, comms, so measuring how board members might field questions and queries from investors and shareholders. What if they're doorstepped by media? Do they need media training? What might they say? Will it harm the business? We've talked about extortion. You could design something around that. Compliance, your scenario might be compliance focused if there's heavy regulation for your organization, or you can measure how they might respond to incoming changes in legislation. And then the other thing, which I think is quite important as well, who has the authority to sanction the shutdown of systems or to sever trust relationships across the business if something's really bad, if you're in a crisis? Do not wait for that crisis to happen to figure out who makes the call on that. It might not be the board, but you need to understand who's going to do that. So lots and lots of things to remember and to embed into a tabletop exercise. So you want to stretch the board, remember. You want them to have some fun. You want to expose them to your cyber teams and to the good work that cyber's doing. And for me, I really want them to go away and thinking about cyber forever, really. All right. So the last one, it's gone by really quickly. This is number one, actually. This is ranked at number one for me. So people, for me, are our biggest asset. We need to look after them. So I'm not going to talk in depth about burnout. There's lots of content about that. You're all aware of burnout. We all work in cyber. But what I would say, and again, this is based on things that have actually happened, do not wait for an incident to make sure there are robust on-call processes in place. Do the people that you anticipate being on call, do they want to be on call? Have you had those conversations? Is it embedded into their offer letters or their contracts? Have those conversations been had during the hiring process? Because believe you me, some of these things have been missed. Is there a mechanism in your organization to pay and reward people for being on call and for being on standby and for working overtime? Do not make that assumption, because I've learned from that as well. If there isn't, you need to go back to your organisations and very quickly and work with HR to get something in place. And again, this one seems really simple. You'd be like, oh, I know that. Prepare on-call rotas, but not just for your own team, for the teams that you anticipate who you might be working with, because you're not going to resolve a cyber incident on your own. You need their contact details, all that good stuff. And one big thing that I've learned, I wish somebody had told me, make sure if you work in a global organisation that international call barring has been lifted from mobile phones. Because I've had people, I can't phone this country or this person because, so make sure you do that. Allow for learning and diversity of thought, even when the pressure's on in a time of crisis. So I've been in situations where I've seen colleagues, it's happened to me, we've been cut off by senior, particularly people in senior positions when we're asking questions. And when it happened to me once, I did challenge it and I was told, well, you're focusing on the wrong thing. And actually, I wasn't focusing on the wrong thing. I was focusing on something different, but something different that would enable me to do my job. And actually, I've seen it. It's really demoralizing. And what it will do, it will make people disengage and retreat. And you need those people in a time of a crisis. So do allow for learning, right? An extra few minutes for people to ask questions is not going to hurt. And that leads me on to trust. Oh my goodness, trust your teams and your colleagues. They were hired for a reason. They are the specialists and experts in their particular field. You need to let them get on with it. We talked about clear command structure earlier. Very common is gold, silver, bronze command, whatever you want to call it. Blurring those lines can be perceived as interference and distrust is what I would say. You know, you don't want someone from Gold Command coming to a bronze call unless it's absolutely necessary. And then do we really need a global head of cyber defense analysing logs in a time of crisis? Well, firstly, I can't. I'm not trained to do that. But actually, maybe there is a need if resource is really strapped. But I know that my teams would prefer from me to get some direction and leadership during a time of a crisis, not meddling with logs because I don't trust my team to do it properly. And then there's nothing like, I've got about 30 seconds, I think, there's nothing like a severe cyber attack or a crisis to promote team cohesion. So if you can, get everyone together, physically together, particularly if you haven't done that in these post-pandemic times, it will really promote team bonding. And think about the building that you're in. Can you actually work from there during a cyber crisis? Is it equipped? Is it the right location? Is it private? Can you conduct sensitive business there? And if you're bringing in third parties like incident responders, lawyers, consultants, whatever, treat them like your team, establish ways of working. I was on a call recently with a trusted partner. There were 6 people and just me, 6 of them, and they all had their cameras off. It was really weird. And then my last point to think about, because I know I'm just about to go over time, is think about the colleague who's clicked on that phishing link, opened the attachment that started the ransomware attack. Think about the colleague who had their credentials compromised that allowed the attacker to get into your environment, because that has happened for a big cyber attack that I was involved in a number of years ago. And the burden on those colleagues, people forget how they might be feeling. They might not be able to work for a considerable period of time. You'll be asking them or HR might be asking them lots of questions whilst the investigation is ongoing. And as much as you're not blaming them, they'll develop a guilt complex. So in terms of well-being, we tend to forget those people. We think about our own teams and staff, but don't forget those people is what I would say. Right, I'm a minute over time, but before I wrap up, just very quickly, there we go. There's the bands. Gives you a bit of an insight into the music I like. But other than that, thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. It is always, to my mind, very instructive to hear from somebody who's very much on top of their job, because when it's laid out like that, it seems so simple. It seems so straightforward, but it's always worthwhile going through these things. There is an opportunity, or there will be an opportunity later, to ask questions of Sonia and Andy and Melissa. And I'll tell you just now, you can ask it via Slido, just enter the QR code in the back of your badge, or do it old school, stick your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. But I'm sure there are questions arising from that. Our next speaker is Andy Brand, Principal Sales Engineer for BlackBerry Cyber Security. What Andy's going to be talking about is why the gold standard security of today probably won't be worth a stuff tomorrow. So, Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the great intro there. Good morning, everybody. Let's put that in place. So, my name's Andy. I'm a sales engineer. I work for BlackBerry. BlackBerry, you're probably thinking of mobile phones. It's a long time since we've done mobile phones. So BlackBerry today is a software and services company. We're heavily in the cyberspace, and we provide secure communications. We protect your data, your endpoint, and your people. And the purpose of today's presentation is I keep seeing in the news every day, every hour, on different threat feeds in the public domain about the amount of businesses that are constantly being attacked, either by ransomware, by other types of malicious software, by different types of breaches. And I just don't understand why it just keeps going on, which makes me think that, the security that you've got in place isn't going to protect you. So I've been looking at all the different facts and figures out there in the public domain. So these isn't facts and figures that I've come up with. I've done a little bit of research. All the information I'm going to share with you is publicly available. But it concerns me that business leaders, even in this day and age, aren't even sure they've even had a data breach. So all those people, all those specialist cybersecurity people that we have, all those security layers that are in place, they don't have the necessary visibility or control to even know that they've even had a breach, which is really concerning. 40%, or I would say much higher than that, actually believe that they will be affected by some form of a cyber breach or cyber attack in 2024. I think it goes without thinking, right? Looking at the news, etc. 25% of business leaders aren't confident that they can defend or respond. I keep hearing about incident retainers and incident response and having incident response plans. I never hear about prevention. Why are we not stopping these attacks before they even have a chance to execute? It's always about defending or responding once the horse has actually bolted. What we want to do is stop the horse bolting in the first place. So it makes me think, do we really understand what the risks are? Do you understand what your risks are within your organisations that you work for? Because I do think it's a national problem. And these are just a couple of examples of some of the information that is out there from the UK national government, where they're saying that, we are potentially at a massive catastrophic risk for a ransomware attack. So even our government are now recognising that ransomware, just one small piece of the puzzle, is a problem on a national scale. And unfortunately, the risks are very, very costly. So not only in terms of, someone was saying about, the ransom attack and paying the ransom, a lot of times we see it's just not one type of encryption, there's multiple. So you pay one ransom, you get the unlock key, oh no, you've got another ransom to pay, and then another ransom to pay. They're quite clever now, quite devious of how they're sort of going around that. You've got the fines, you've got GDPR and all the other fines that might come in place. Rebuilding your infrastructure. So a few years ago, or more than a few years ago now, one of my customers was Sony when they got hacked. Sony had no idea how they got breached. They went around to every single machine, pulled out the hard disk because they were completely paranoid that it might have been an insider attack or some other form of attack that was going on. No idea whatsoever. And such a large, media, modern organisation, no visibility, no control. You've then got the brand damage. I just ran through Sony. There's loads of examples there. And you can see on the right-hand side, well-known businesses out there, big digital footprints being affected by breaches. It's the reputation, but it's also career ending. Sonia again said about, remember the people that have been compromised. Think of the people where their password has been hacked. It's a big thing. You could lose your job. You could lose your career. You might even lose your business if you get hit by a breach and you're fined. Because 4% of your annual revenue, or anything up to 17.5 million, that's a lot of money. So have we actually learned our lesson? So 2017 was when the NHS were hacked. They were hit by WannaCry, which was a new sample of ransomware for that year. And it was the first time in 2017 we started seeing those samples. Now, the NHS were hit really, really badly, weren't they? Because a number of hospitals went offline, a number of PCTs couldn't offer any sort of primary care, or A&E couldn't do anything. So imagine ringing up 999, you needed medical help, and there's no one there to help you. It's a big, big problem. In 2018, there was a detailed report. It's about a 30-page document. I can send you the link if you want to have a look at it. It was all the recommendations, all the lessons learned following that attack on how they would then create a much better system in place in terms of inter-department communication, what they would do about endpoints. And the key thing I was looking at is what they're doing around the antivirus piece. What are they going to do to stop these pieces of ransomware being detonated again? And they said they're going to make sure that every single endpoint has antivirus, which is a bit of a no-brainer, really. You want every single endpoint to have some form of a security layer on there to stop these things. And every single device must be up to date. So really, really basic recommendations, which means you're still using what I would term legacy endpoint security. You're relying on daily updates to convict a potential malicious file. We still need to push out patches and updates. I've never met an organization in all the years I've worked in IT that's got a 100% patch success rate. Not one. Don't care how small you are, don't care how big you are, there's always one machine that's going to be out of date for some type of reason. And these types of antivirus that they're putting in place isn't going to protect you against the next generation of threats. And unfortunately, on the 15th of March, we saw that another NHS has been hit with a breach. So it got me thinking about the history of threats, because we've been using terms like antivirus and endpoint security for a number of years now. So I went back to 1971, which was actually before I was born, so I'm not that old, not quite. But that was when the first virus was actually developed. But it wasn't until the mid-1980s that we started using algorithm and signatures to detect pieces of malware. So we are using, even today, a lot of the vendors that I see on the market are still using signature-based technology to protect you against the next generation threats. Which means you've got a 100% chance of convicting a malicious file if it has the right signature for it. But if it doesn't, you've got a 100% failure rate. And it wasn't until really 2010 that we started seeing AI, the buzzword that everyone's talking about, being employed into antivirus or against cyber threats. But again, the way that AI is being used in cyber threats today isn't from a preventative module, it's more from a generative AI, which means we're going to wait for an event to actually take place, like the horse is already bolted. We're going to feed that information to AI, and AI is going to say, oh, you need to close the gate and put a big lock on it. That's not stopping the threat. That's not really helping you. So it got me thinking. Imagine you got your dream job, right? Google, Apple, whoever it might be, right? You've got your dream job. You go in day one, and you sit in your desk, and you've got your notepad, you've got your mug, and IT come in, and they go, right, we're going to issue you your corporate equipment. So they give you your phone. They give you your laptop, right? And they give you the ability to connect into the internet. And I'll be honest, I showed my niece this picture. She had no idea what it was on the right-hand side. She was a phone, but she had no idea it was a modem. So imagine that IT equipment given today in the modern world. So 2024, you're given that. But that's the same thing we're saying, right? The cybersecurity solutions that majority of businesses have in place were designed around the mid-80s. So why are you using something that's 20, 30 years old to protect your most vulnerable data, your people, and your endpoints? Something has to really drastically change in order to beat the next generation of threats. AI, the new buzzword, right? AI is everywhere. We're in an AI evolution, a revolution, you could argue. Even my mum has mentioned AI. I mean, crikey, she's nearly 80. Everyone is talking about AI. It's in the films, it's in the media. You can't get away from it. Everyone is talking about it. And unfortunately, cyber criminals are using AI to develop new threats. And there are loads of examples out there of different types of new pieces of malware, new samples being used that are polymorphic, meaning they change and they're really hard for antivirus to stop them because, again, we're using quite old legacy means to stop that. Lots of examples, and especially this one. An AI malware that evades cybersecurity. So there's something called Chatty Catty, which is like a platform. You can ask it to create pieces of malware. So you can say, I want to create some malware that's going to circumvent certain security vendors. And then it spits out this piece of malware, and away you go and cause havoc. It's really, really dangerous. And it happens. It happened last year. There was a new threat came out called Pool Party, a third-party safe breach. They tested it against 5 of the top leading vendors. Not one of them stopped it. So I would argue, if you're using one of those potential vendors, if you are, have a rethink. Have a think of what you can do better. Because the only way you're going to stop AI is to fight AI against AI. And once you're using AI in a defensive cybersecurity strategy or posture, then you're going to have that capability in place. And we use, at Blackberry Science, we use 2 different types of AI. We use it in a generative mode, which is what I was saying earlier on. If an event has already taken place, we're using AI to rationalize those events so you can perform investigations quicker and you can respond to things that have taken place. Maybe not from a cyber perspective all the time, but also from a predictive perspective. So let's have a look at a file that's landed on a computer, however it's got there, and based on how the file was made, how it's put together, we will work out whether it's malicious or not malicious. We don't need signatures. We don't need to detonate or execute the file. We can look at it in its dormant state and block it there and then. So preventing cyber threats before they have a chance to actually do any damage. So we've been doing this for about 15 years. We're very mature. We're on our 7th generation of AI and machine learning, which sits on each and every endpoint. We don't use a cloud engine or anything like that. When I say 7th generation, I'm not talking about the 7th version or the 7th iteration. AI is so broad. There are so many different parts to it that are being used by so many different types of companies. But there's also different generations of it. So the first generation was like in the 1950s when AI was first sort of being developed. That's using like static rules. If you use Siri or Alexa, I shouldn't have said that maybe, the phones might start beeping, but that uses 4th generation AI. So we're using AI everywhere in different ways, but we use the latest version or latest generation of AI to perform these types of security posture to stop these types of threats. And because we've been doing it a long time, we've got a lot more patents than others. That's important because we're going to get a lot lower false positive rates. We're going to spend less time troubleshooting things that are not malicious and things that are benign. And as you see there, that's a daily changing rate. You can go to VirusTotal. It's a great source of information intelligence to look at the different types of false positives. But because we're using AI, because of the way that we look at the actual files themselves, there's a lot of power between that. And we've got different versions of our AI, dating back to like 2015, where we still throw samples from today against that old mass model to see if it would actually stop it. And there's a couple of examples here. So the Yashma ransom samples, which are 78 months, or we took our AI version, our endpoint version from 78 months ago. So we've got an antivirus that's 6.5 years old, not had any updates because we don't use updates, we just use AI. And we threw a sample from 2023 against it and it stopped it. Imagine taking your existing antivirus solution you have in place and not updating it for 6.5 years and throwing samples from 2023 against it. You're not going to stop that. Because even the versions today don't stop it. That's the power of AI, and that's the power behind BlackBerry. And there's lots of examples out there. So Tolly did a third-party test of a number of the leading endpoint solutions to check performance, to check efficacy rates in terms of how accurate it would be against a subset of samples. And then also to look at what utilization that was having on the machine. Because I remember the days when I was a McAfee consultant, all the users would be upset when an on-demand scan was taking place because it used to eat up all the CPU, used to eat up all the memory, the hard disks were just ground to a halt. The users couldn't do anything. So as you can see there, we stopped more attacks than everyone else that was tested. We're a lot quicker at detecting the threats, and we use a lot less resources, which means you've got happy users. Happy users, less tickets, less problem, less noise. But you're robust, you're increasing your security. It's well validated. We've got loads of different customers in Scotland and across the UK and globally that are using our technology, obviously being recognised by Gartner. And the whole malware prevention is just one small piece of what BlackBerry does today. So I've only talked really about the malware prevention, but there are so many other areas there that we work in and how we utilise AI. Thanks very much for your time. Look forward to any questions we have later on. I don't know how I did that. Was I ahead of time?
I think you're ahead of time.
Wow. Wow.
You live and learn.
Oh, well, I'll have to check. Yeah. Ooh. Speed talking. But anyway, thanks for your time. If you've got any questions, come and speak to me. Or Stu. Stu, stand up at the back. Get your 2 minutes of fame. There he is. He's still awake. Well done. Come and speak to myself or Stu, but thanks very much. Cheers.
Okay. Our third speaker this morning is Melissa Goldsmith, who's a threat hunter and technical lead for NBC Universal. We had a bit of a discussion about bodging earlier, and this features in her presentation. So, Melissa, over to you.
Hello. I'm not going to have a timer, so Mark, please just let me know if I just go over. All right. So, welcome to my talk, Threat Hunting from Bodging to Efficiency. I like to say bodging, it's a fun little term. Just a bit about who I am. I've been doing this for quite a while. I've been doing red teaming, blue teaming, and started doing threat hunting. I don't know what is that purple? I don't know. But I started doing it officially in 2020 when I was working for US Bank, and I was like, I'm kind of sick of doing incident response. I was learning about threat hunting. I'm like, this sounds really interesting. And obviously working for the DoD, we've been doing that for quite a few years anyways. And they're like, yeah, sure, you can do that in your part-time when you're not doing an incident. I'm like, okay, classic. And then I started doing it full-time though at NBC Universal when they're like, please come and start up. Like, they already had a threat hunting program, but they wanted to help mature it. So they asked me to come on, and I said, that sounds great. So hunting in a nutshell, and being realistic, it's not a question of if your company is going to be attacked and pwned. It's a question of when and how severe. And I have up here on the slides some of the bigger ones that you probably all know and are afraid of. So you have the Okta one that happened last year, which was interesting because when they first disclosed it, which is, again, probably like 4 o'clock on a Friday, which is the way everyone discloses all of their breaches, they were like, oh, it's a very small breach. Don't worry about it. Like less than 1% of the customer base has been affected. And then I think it was a couple weeks later or months later, like, actually it's about 99% of our customer base. So that was a pretty big thing. And then we had Microsoft just recently, again, 4 o'clock on a Friday, disclosing that they had a breach. And they said, don't worry, it was just in testing. They just happened to get some emails. Don't worry about it. And then a couple of weeks ago, they said, actually, some source code was taken. So we don't know what the effects of that are going to be, but fun for us. And then we have the classic Las Vegas hack from, I think it was October of last year, where you had Scattered Spider hitting MGM and Caesar's Palace. And I think Caesar's paid, allegedly, half of their ransom, which was $15 million US. I don't know what that is, and I can't make that conversion. And then MGM lost. I think they decided they weren't going to pay, and they lost $100 million US in downtime. So that's pretty bad, and I think they got in via social engineering. So somebody calling up the help desk and saying, I need this now. I have a presentation in 10 minutes. I need to get access, and that's how they got in. So that's always fun. And CrowdStrike said in their 2023 threat hunting report that there is one potential intrusion every 7 minutes. And they declare an intrusion as like hands-on keyboard. Somebody logs in, gets their cup of coffee, and says, okay, what am I doing today? I'm hacking this big pharma. All right, let's start up. So that's not just someone, something dropping malware on a system, nothing automatic. It's actually a human on the keyboard. So that's fun. So the bottom line up front is the earlier on in the attack lifecycle that you can find these actors in your network, the less painful, costly, embarrassing it will be. The last thing you want is your CISO calling you because they saw their name on Krebs, and you're like, oh God, this is not going to be a fun day at all. So when I say attack lifecycle, what do I mean? And I'm pretty sure most people here are familiar with the one on the left. That is our classic attack MITRE framework, which we really base our hunting programs off of. And all of those tactics have sub-techniques, under those. And I'm sure most people have seen it. It's like this giant graph, and you're like, how am I going to print this out? I need like the big printers and stuff like that. And it's very, very descriptive, and it can be a bit nuanced trying to figure out where do these things fit in this MITRE attack framework, but I highly recommend it. The one on the right is probably more US focused. It was created by Lockheed Martin, which is a huge US cyber defense contractor. But I work for a US company, so we have a lot of ex-military people there, and they like to use the cyber kill chain, which is a bit more vague, which can be good, but then it's also like, where does this fit in the picture? But the point is, you wanna, wait, I have a laser pointer. Oh, right. So you wanna find them here, right? Because once they start, grabbing creds and dumping your LSAS and creating the back doors and making lateral movement, it gets really, really hard to boot them out. So you want to find them as early on in the kill chain as possible. Same up here. it's kind of hard to do recon. There are ways of, trying to reduce your internet footprint, and there's probably companies that will say that they can help you do that. I'm not here to tell you if that's true or not. But, you always try and want to get them here, but down there, it gets much harder, right? So what is threat hunting? If I had to put threat hunting on a coffee mug, it would be 2 words: assume, compromise, right? Our job is to be in the network, looking around, poking around, trying to see if we can find some weird anomalous activity happening on our network. That can be easy, that can be also very hard, depends on how advanced the threat actor is, or the malware, or, and also what kind of logs we have access to. So what does hunting include? It's everything and anything. So like when I first started out in 2007, it felt like, oh, I just need all the network logs, and I need all the host space logs. Like, you're crazy. We can't do all that. That's so much. That's like gigabytes of data. And now it's like, I think my laptop is like a terabyte of storage, and you're like, flip. You can't really, imaging that stuff is really, really hard from a blue team perspective. But the amount of data we have now is crazy. And then you think about cloud and containers and Kubernetes, and you're like, and you say, I want all the logs, and you're like, so this is a classic one, a classic meme of, the poor person, just standing there trying to deal with all the stuff that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis as a threat hunter, as a blue teamer, even as a red teamer. Keeping up to date is always really, really hard. It's, one of the joys of cybersecurity is that it's always evolving, it's always changing, but that's also a pain point. Sometimes you're like, I just want to have a cup of coffee and calm down. You can't, because there's this new remote code execution that just dropped on Team City, and now you're running around trying to help, see if we have people banging on the door with this kind of stuff. And you're like, okay, well, never mind, we'll switch to a gin and tonic, but that's fine. Lack of funding is always a problem. The speed of your SIM is a problem. So speaking of all those logs that you have, right, that has to go somewhere and be ingested and parsed and indexed and all that, right? Many times I have gotten a message from one of the heads of the logging team saying, Melissa, what are you doing? Why are you querying this? And what's the size and the time that you're trying to query? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find this thing. And they're like, yeah, you need to be smarter with your querying. So you have the speed of your SIM, and then you have fires. So I mentioned Team City. There seems to be so many more vulnerabilities that are leading to remote code execution, and the malicious, the bad actors are now seemingly being able to exploit that. And then if it's seeing in the wild, that's what you're doing that day, right? You're not doing what you thought you were doing. So if you're starting out your hunting program, right, your CISO goes golfing with another CISO. They talk about this threat hunting program that they're starting up, and your CISO's like, oh, we don't have a threat hunting program. You, go do some threat hunting. Like, all right. So how to hunt when you're a small team. To remember that you're never alone. Share the wealth, share the load. So you might actually still be on one of these teams. So it's very helpful to know your coworkers. So your forensics and your IR and your security, your SOC analysts, you can get some great hunting ideas from previous incidents, and you hand off escalations to them. So it's really good to have that relationship. And the SOC analysts are the kind of the boots on the ground, right? So they can see all the pain points, what's working, what's not working, or they can start seeing some similarities. Like, hey, Melissa, we're starting to see a lot of these bat loader infections. Can you maybe look into this and see if there's anything we can do, again, to find them earlier on in the kill chain than what we're currently finding them on. And then the people on the right are the people that make the jobs on the left much more easy. So you have your security technology team, the security onboarding team, so like new technologies. At NBC Universal, we have lots of small companies that we seem to take on, and we have lots of different verticals. So we have lots of new things coming on board. We have the Olympics coming up, which has this whole other slew of problems. So we need to really work with those teams in order to get the hunting in place that we can be making sure that the Olympics, hopefully, goes off without a hitch. Then you have your cloud. I'm pretty sure everybody here is probably in the cloud in some way, shape, or form. It is a minefield, so it's really important to have a good relationship with your cloud team. And also, you might have multiple clouds, which is always a problem. Documentation is your friend. So this is probably coming back from the blue team side of like the IR side, because you never know when you might get pulled into court. So you really want to make sure you have everything documented. So in case you're standing up in front of the court and you can say with confidence what you're saying is true. So there's a bunch of different things that you should probably be doing. And again, it always seems weird if you're a team of one, you're like, why do I need to document if it's just me? Well, what happens if you start getting more people in your team, or something happens to you and then somebody else has to take over your job? You want them to hit the ground running so then they don't have to be redoing your work. Some examples would be having report templates. If you're sending out reports, who do they go to and what is the email format, those kind of things. Explaining your log sources, because it might not just be host-based log, your event logs and, web logs. It might be some really complicated, weird stuff that you're like, I think I want to document this in case I have to come back to this in 6 months' time, or Sam needs to come back to it in 6 months' time. So then you can say, oh, these are Azure logs, and these are all the fields, and this is what they mean. This way then it makes, again, in future, it makes your job much easier. Useful queries. So again, I kind of mentioned that not all queries are created and built the same. You can write some pretty fancy queries, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. I didn't know you could tie the parent process ID to the child process ID to then get a whole slew of like the network data and everything like that. So you can say, oh, that's good. I can save that for my SOC analysts. So then they have a query that they can look at. Escalation procedures. This is very important, because obviously if you are doing threat hunting and you see something weird on the network, that's basically badness is happening, you need to do something absolutely right now. So you want to make sure that when you are escalating that to your response team or your SOC, they know they have everything that they need to start moving, right? Start isolating, start to analyze, start to pull the right people involved. So you want to make sure, so you talk to them and say, hey, if I'm escalating something to you, what exactly are the fields, the data points, the logs, the queries that you need in order to succeed? And we have here a generic methodology of your threat hunting life cycle, I guess. So the top one is identifying your hunt plan. So this is like, what do you want to hunt today? So for example, I'll use CertUtil, the classic living off the land binary in Windows, which they realize that you can actually just download secondary malware using CertUtil. You don't need to download anything else to do it. So you say, okay, I want to look for malicious CertUtil usage in my environment. Okay, scope that. Okay, well, Windows, easy. Okay, do you want to focus on servers? Do you want to focus on workstations? Do you want to focus on accounting? Do you want to focus on the tech guys, tech people, because tech people usually like to be the ones that are abusing and skirting around what they should be doing anyways. Sources, all right, so web logs, because it has to go out to the internet. So they might have an interesting user agent that you can start pinging off of to say, hey, I'm seeing CertUtil going out. Where is it going? Is that valid? YN. And then also you have your host-based logs. So there's two sources. And again, if you don't have those, that's a gap. So you've already found a good visibility gap that you can go to management and say, we couldn't do this because of X, Y, Z, these gaps. All right, so let's try and fix that. And then you have the execution of your plan. So running around, writing your queries, investigating all of your findings that you have, escalating if needed, and then you draw your conclusion. Yes, we found malicious CertUtil usage. No, we didn't. But we now have this snazzy query that has a high fidelity rate, so low false positive rate, that we can now pass off to our detections team, which can then turn into alert. So then 6 months later, if threat actor Y tries to use CertUtil, you found them. An alert goes off, IR kicks off, huzzah. And then you share your report with the relevant parties, with the queries, your executive summary, all that good stuff. So documentation, very important. Prioritizing your hunts. So it's very important to remember that things will fall behind. Hunts will be put on the back burner. We probably have about 15 hunts that are just kind of sitting there waiting to have someone have the time to deal with it. And then that's just trying to figure out what's the most important thing today, right? So again, a remote code execution drops with a vulnerability that you know that your company has that asset. You're not going to be doing what you thought you were doing today. You're going to be helping to hunt with that. And that's just the way of the game. So some great hunts to start with. Excuse me. So be the ones with the easy-ish answers. And I say easy-ish because it's only easy if you know your environment. So the more stuff that you know about your environment is normal, then it's easier to find the abnormal, right? And it's very hard to do that, especially in my current job, because we have so many different verticals. You know, we have parks, we have news, we have films, you know, all this stuff, and we have some very important people that are employees that we need to deal with. So I say it's easy, but it really can be or can't be. So process hierarchy, you know, these are kind of like, I think SANS has that very classic thing that people used to have on their walls of like, this is the Windows 11 like boot up, and like these things, it will always, like this process will always spawn this child process. And if you see service host being started with calculator, it's probably not normal. You might want to take a look at it. So process hierarchy is always a good hunt to start with if you're just starting out. Scripting processes making outbound network connections. Again, this is going to be, you're going to get lots of false positives here. So you have to start filtering out the ones that you know are good. So is it pulling weather data? Okay, well, that's a good thing. We can filter out that IP. Is it going to one of our cloud instances? Okay, well, we can filter that out. We know that's a good thing. Is it going to some Latvian IP address? We don't do any business in Latvia. Might want to take a look at that, right? And then if you start finding things that are business as usual, document it, right? Go back to documentation is your friend. This way then, 6 months down the road, someone sees that, they're like, oh yeah, we already looked at that, and that's normal. Abnormal cloud things, version disabling and new user failures. So version disabling is usually something that threat actors like to do right before they deploy the ransomware, or just deleting all your data, because then you can't revert. So suddenly you start seeing a key coming from an interesting IP address that you've never seen anybody log into, starting to try and disable versions. It's version disabling. You're like, is that normal? Probably not. And then new user failures, usually, just like when an attacker gets on the network, they'll run like three, like, who am I priv, IP config, right? Those three things. They want to know who they are on the network, where they are on the network, and what access they have. Same thing if they get access to like keys. They want to know what permissions they have. So they'll start trying to create new users. They'll start trying to generate other keys. So then they have a secondary way into your network. Again, you take a look at that, you're like, ugh, is that normal? Again, if you know your network, you'll say yes or no. And then we have ones where the heavy lifting is done for you. On my 6-hour train ride here, I was reading one of the threat reports from 2023, I think it was from Red Canary, making notes. Like, that is a treasure trove of hunting ideas that you can use for your network. But obviously there's quite other people out there that have a list. It's non-exhaustive. There's plenty of other companies out there that have really good reporting that you can start to look for hunting ideas. This is another place I recently found called MITRE Ingenuity. I didn't know they existed. But basically you kind of give them what kind of, like, where are you in the hunting, in the monitoring components of these different things like your network or your cloud, and then it'll spew out, these are the top 10 techniques that you need to focus on. We'll see you in 2 years, which is very handy if you're just starting out. But something that we were thinking about is if you have a Windows environment, you still need to worry about Linux because of WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux. And you might think, my company doesn't use that. I guarantee you one of your users is, because they just want to try it, they just want to see what they can do. And a lot of EDRs don't have purview into that. So something you might want to think about. Measuring success. So this is the big thing, proving the value of your company so you make sure you still get a paycheck every month. I kind of have some good ideas listed here. Escalation. So if you're hunting and you find badness, you escalate it. If it wasn't for hunting, that would have continued on to, who knows, ransomware. Maybe it would have gotten blocked by your EDR. You don't know, right? But this is a win for the hunting team. So we found something good happening on the network. Then we have detection. So, okay, maybe we didn't find anything, like with the cert util example, but we now have this query which is now becoming an alert. So we've created a detection thanks to the hunting that we've done. That again shows value for hopefully preventing future attacks. And then we have our kill chain MITRE coverage. So remember that giant thing that I don't know how I'm going to print this out. You can start actually filling those in. Say, okay, we now have 4 queries that are detecting on LSAS being dumped via Mimikatz or using comm services or whatever, what have you. And then you can start light is green, trap is clean, right? You start with red, we have no detections, and you start moving up to green being, we're 95% sure we got this sub-technique covered, which always looks good. And you get a bonus if you can focus that with your intel team giving you the techniques that we know the threat actors that are actively attacking you or trying to attack you are using, right? So if you're worried about Cozy Bear or something, you can say, okay, what are those techniques that they're using? And we want to focus on those, turning those red to green. And then true positive alerts. So again, those detections that you created previously, how many of those have actually triggered and resulted in, again, an event happening? And of course, the focus here is true positive. Because if you have false positives, you shouldn't have probably been escalating that to detection as an alert, because you don't want to overburden your SOC with false positives. So we have some examples here. So just want to say your threat team's hunting escalations to response increased over 1,000% since last year. I'm like, I'm getting my bonus. So, but how we got there was we had to request from our ticketing team our own ticket type, so it's easier for us to track it. And then we had to then go to the SOC's team and say, can you add final results into the ticket so then we can track this better? So we might have been doing this a fine job the year before, but if we don't have those measurements to easily, if we don't have those ways to easily measure our success, it's hard to show it. See, really good. And then the one below is the hunting sources that we have. So you have, okay, we have all these OSINT hunting sources. So again, like I saw a BlackBerry report and I did some hunting on it, okay? And then we have this one in blue that says, okay, of those hunting sources that we've gotten, how many of those resulted in an incident? Like not really showing value, but it shows the value of the intel sources that you're getting it from. And not surprisingly, our intel team actually did a pretty good job. So maturing. So those other teams, like you're going to be working with them to try and make it all better, right? Hunting and intel and incident response, they have this very lovely symbiotic relationship that when it all works, when it clicks, it really clicks. And it's very important to do and have those kind of relationships. So automation. So can you script things that are done every day that can be done automatically? We actually did a lot of this with actually talking with Batloader, dealing with search engine optimization, trying to figure out a smarter way of trying to get, again, before the user can get to that bad website, to try and get that to stop. And we were able to do that with automation with something called JARMS. If you're interested, ping me. It's very interesting, I think, from a nerd perspective. Smarter intel. So asking the intel to provide you targeted information. Again, are you worried about Cozy Bear? Well, ask them to tell you, well, what are the techniques that they're using? And only give us those kind of things because they're targeted. This way, then we're not just kind of doing a generic hunt. We're doing one that's actually actively affecting our environment. Being proactive. So somebody mentioned VirusTotal, creating Yara rules to go find other pieces of malware that those threat actors are potentially leveraging, and then detonating them in a safe environment, and then pulling out those tactics, techniques, and procedures, and then testing them on your own environment. Because if it's successful elsewhere, they're probably going to try it on you. And of course, knowledge, the constant battle to learn more about a technique or tool. So, Mac malware is a big thing, and we have a lot of Macs in our environment, so it's something that I know we need to focus on. Purple team assemble. So this is working in collaboration with your red team, blue team, or doing some kind of threat simulation to actively and effectively test your defense in depth. And baselining at the start of the year and saying this was our score, and then at the end of the year doing that same baseline to say this is the improvement. So then you can, again, show that collaboration and cohesion of like, this is what we're worried about, this is what we're doing to fix it, and look, we can show results. But at the end of the day, start small, and if it isn't working, change the process. If you're a team of one, it's very easy for you to change your process because you can say, do I want to do this? Yes, I do. Okay, move on. And it's okay to stand on the shoulders of giants. Just make sure to give credit where credit is due. And realize that not every hunt will end with a kill. But again, if you have those detections that you put in place from previous hunts, the actor will land on your network and they have absolutely nowhere to go. And that's kind of what you want. Thank you very much.
going to open this to questions from the floor now. You can either do it by Slido, as I said, or you can do it old school, which is basically just sticking your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. We've got a couple of microphones in the hall. Has anybody got a question for any of our first three speakers? Right at the very front here, please. Thank you. If you could identify yourself as well, please, sir.
Yeah, I'm Lord Skivlin, Vagon. It's a question for Sonia. So, assuming you've got like a major breach happens, do you think it's better to start off with a wider team in that response team and then whittle it down as you rule out, well, actually, there's not certain areas aren't affected? Or do you start small and then pull in specialists as you come across things?
I've been in extremes. So last year, I left Vodafone Group to go to Element Materials Technology, just in terms of what they are, because it will help. So we are 300 laboratories around the world, and we do testing inspection for nuclear, aerospace defense, pharmaceuticals, life sciences, connected technologies, so really important data. Myself and my boss went in because there was no cybersecurity program or capability, and I've gone in to build from scratch a 24/7 global cyber defense or SOC capability. So I've gone from Vodafone, which is very mature, very busy, but very mature, to an organization that's not so much. So I think I can't answer that question. You have to do the best you can with what you've got. So when I went into Element, cyber defense was just me and a contractor. And over the last year, I've slowly built the team. I've taken on a senior manager for incident response, and he's building his team. You do the best you can with what you've got. And if you haven't got enough, you're going to have to look for outside help. So it's a bit of a cop-out, but that's kind of the answer.
Can I ask the obverse of that question too? I mean, you said at the beginning of your presentation that there was a big incident, all hell broke loose.
Yep.
You had no immediate idea what was happening, but there were lots and lots of people involved. And you said, basically you had to whittle down the number of people immediately involved. How do you know how to do that? If you don't know the nature of the threat, how do you know who you can do without?
So most incidents will start with some type of alerting. Somebody will see something in the most simplest of terms. I want to speak to the people, the person that's seen whatever it is that started everything off and really understand. So the source of an incident can be from alerts. Somebody might have reported something, could be from anything. So for me, that's the person that I want to speak to find out the facts. But really basic stuff. What's gone on? What did they see? And then it will help me make an assessment as to what we need to do next.
Did you physically move them out of the room so you could talk to them?
So there were some people in a room because it was pre-pandemic times. We were in the office, but it was mostly we were on this video conference bridge. It was so many people, and we were a global organisation, and there was lots of different people. I just had to ask people. Basically, I think there were about 30 people, and I asked about 4 or 5 people to stay, and everybody else to drop from the call. Yeah.
And as you said, diplomatically, that's quite sensitive.
It can be quite sensitive, yeah, but it's needs must, right?
Okay. Right. Another question from the floor. Well, I'm just going to sit here till somebody actually puts their hand up.
There's one at the back.
Right at the very back there. Actually, no, I'll take the one at the very back first, please. James. You.
Oh, yeah. James, ISC squared. So question for Melissa. When do you know when to stop in terms of your hunting and improving your controls? Because there's only a finite budget. So have you got any methodology for sort of prioritizing which controls you're going to focus on, please? Thanks.
Do you mean just like if I'll use the cert util, for example, like when do I stop hunting for cert util like that?
Yeah, it could be anything. Because you're going to, there's an infinite number of attack vectors.
Right.
How do you prioritize?
So usually what we like to say is like, it depends on your SIM and how much data that you're storing. So we like to go back between 30 and 90 days, depending on what it is that we're hunting the data. So usually that gives you enough of a window that you're like, okay, I'm trying to find, because you're trying to find it active, but you're also doing a bit of a historical just to kind of CYA. But a hunt normally takes about 2 weeks, we say, from, here's my idea, and here's the report. It always varies, right? But so I'll say it depends on your sim and how much data that you're storing.
How do you define, you said at the end, not every hunt ends in a kill. How do you define a kill? What is a kill?
I say a kill would be basically if you find badness on the network. So for like,
And deal with that badness.
and escalate it, and then the response team, isolates the host or whatever, and then they work to get that fixed, that problem fixed. A lot of the times when we're hunting, it's kind of, remember that meme? It's like what my mom thinks I do versus what I actually do kind of thing. So what we kind of say hunting is actually finding more about configuration issues, problems at the people, processes, and technology. So that's usually the stuff that we find, which is still technically a kill, and it helps the defense of the network, but it's not the exciting, oh my gosh, there's somebody getting ready to deploy ransomware on the cloud, somebody hit the button absolutely right now, which is very exciting, but also very terrifying at the same time.
Okay, I'm going to take one question. I'll come to you. There was somebody in the middle there on the right-hand side, and I'm going to come to you in a second, but I'm going to take something from Slido for a start. Do the panelists who spoke about AI, and I'm looking at you, Andy, have any wise words about the new EU AI legislation?
Which new EU AI legislation are you referring to? I'm not familiar with it, so I can't answer that, unfortunately.
Well, that's an honest answer to a daft question, I would say. That's fine.
I think just to pick up on that, I think my opinion is it's good because it centres around regulatory elements of AI, and it gives guidance to not just EU member states, right, but to the UK. The UK could probably learn. I'm not an AI specialist, but I would say it's a positive thing. It's probably needed. I guess it's going to become iterative. It's the first iteration of legislation, but it's a start for 10, is what I would say.
All legislation lags behind reality.
Oh, yeah. Yes. It does.
And going back to what Andy was talking about in his presentation, Andy, you said that basically people are using AI nowadays to develop malware. Presumably, when you said 95%, of all detection comes through other AI, can good AI keep ahead of bad AI?
It depends on how you're training the AI in the first place. So in order to develop AI and make it more and more accurate as time goes on, you obviously need the money, you need the actual source of the data. So you need different types of threat data types to train AI to understand when it sees something that it thinks is malicious, it's going to block it, essentially. So you need to have so many different types of diverse data threats to train the AI so it knows what to do. Because if it doesn't recognize something, or it thinks it knows something, yeah, it may still act and stop it. But if there's a brand new attack that comes out tomorrow that has never been seen before, it's completely a new revolution, then the AI models might not understand what that is. So it all comes down to how you train the AI piece. But again, because cyber is so broad and, the presentation was more around sort of files and stuff like that, but you need to have, diverse files. You need to have good files, bad files, red herrings. You need to have all different types of file types so that AI understands when it can tell the difference between a driver and, a piece of ransomware, as an example.
Interesting question from Mick there saying, which has just disappeared.
Yeah.
Doesn't say. It's dancing about all over the place. Do you find phishing testing of end users a valuable process, or do you feel it desensitizing to them where they feel it's just another test, close inverted commas? That to you, Melissa.
It depends. So I know at our company, we have it, if you take part in the phishing test, you can win a free iPad. So I think people really love it. But I think it's one of those things where I think it helps to gauge the ability of your end users because some of them, I know when we do the testing, some of them are really, really good and some of them are really, really bad. And it's interesting to see that difference, if there is a difference of, the click rates and things like that. So I think it's good for us. I know users find it very frustrating.
You mentioned social engineering too, and the fact that people want to be helpful, that people are, I think, are naturally kind. Is that necessarily, in your opinion, Sonia, an inherent weakness in any system?
Say that again for me.
The fact that people are inherently kind,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
if you if you're attempting social engineering and you are lucky enough to find the helpful person, is that inherently a weakness in any system?
What, the fact that we've got a...
Well, there is kindness there, that people want to help.
The
That,
human factor is the weakness.
Sorry?
The
Oh,
human
I-
factor is weakness.
Oh, that's debatable. No, that's
Well,
debatable.
then debate it.
We all make mistakes. I mean, even the best IT professionals out there, we always make mistakes. We always like misclick something, or we look at something and for a second our mind's on something else, right, and we click on something. So someone who's less technical or less security astute could easily fall into that social engineering trap.
Well, I'm going to use myself as an example. So again, I was in Vodafone Group. There was a phishing simulation that was being run at the time. I usually got sight of those kinds of things, but on this particular occasion, I didn't for whatever reason. That was fine. I don't drink or smoke, but I'm addicted to sweets and chocolate. And it was around about, I think, I don't know, Christmas or something, some kind of holiday event where it was like, yeah, get 25% off chocolates if you're a Vodafone employee. I was like, yeah, I'll have some of that, have some. And then this big thing flashed up and the whole of our cyber defence ops centre kind of just stood up. And it was, you know, so it can happen to the best of us, is what I would say. To answer the question about simulations, I think to Melissa's point, it depends. You know, there are simulations that I've observed that don't even collect the data. It's like, what's the point in running them? They're just compliance, you know, tick box exercises. Actually, I think if you're going to run them, you've got to think about what you want to achieve. What is it you want to measure? What do you want to collect? They're not just there so you can just say, oh yeah, we run them. So I don't know if that answered the question, Mark. I've gone off track a bit, but...
No, that's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Somebody's been waiting patiently about here somewhere. Again, if you could identify yourself, please, first.
I've forgotten the question now. Max NG, Lloyds Banking Application Security Engineer. I've got a question for Andy, and it's, does your anti-malware solution detect 0 days, and how effective is it?
Yeah, so the question was, does our endpoint solution or AI stop 0 days? Yes, it does. So the way that we trained our AI was to look at a file. So if you take a portable executable as an example, everyone just sees it as a single entity, but it's made up of so many different components and different attributes. So we trained the AI model to essentially look at the file and look at all the different attributes. And if you look at that, if you multiply that over petabytes and petabytes of bad files, there's certain patterns, there's certain things that are really similar across all different types of malware. So that's how we can look at a 0-day piece of malware and convict it. We don't need a signature, we don't need an update, it doesn't matter what it is. We can look at it based on how the file's put together and the information that's contained within it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so do you just use your own proprietary data set, or do you also use open source sources?
So I didn't catch.
Proprietary or...
Could you say that again, please?
Yes, do you just use your own data set, or do you use open source data sets as well?
What, for the training?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's different threat feeds that we use. So we will use our own, but there will be the other data feeds that we get from other people as well.
There's a question here on Slido. I'm going to paraphrase it. It says, the actual question reads, what scenarios would you say is acceptable to pay a ransomware, or should businesses have a zero tolerance to ransomware payments? The way I want to paraphrase it is a zero tolerance to ransomware payments even possible?
I think you have to do what is right for your... I used to be of the thought a couple of years ago, absolutely don't negotiate with kind of terrorist kind of mentality, but that has changed over the years because of what I've seen. So for example, in a threat to life situation, which you might laugh at, but actually you might have a cyber attack which leads to a threat to life situation, you might consider actually paying a ransom. It depends, there's so many factors. I think you would, you know, it's such a hot topic. Ideally, might not want to, because it doesn't, you know, do you want to trust a criminal? But I think it's very difficult to say do not pay or do pay. You have to do what's right for your people and for your organisation or the situation at the time.
Have either of you ever been asked for your advice on whether to pay for ransomware?
No, but I completely agree. I think it depends on the data that's encrypted, and it depends on the users and the business impact. Mm-hmm. So I'd never say to someone, don't pay, but then it comes down to the person in the business. Well, so I completely agree with what you said. So,
Because we never truly know what's going on inside an organisation that's suffering from a ransomware attack or any kind of serious, severe cyber attack. You don't actually know. So it's easy to criticise from the outside, but actually you don't know.
How did you mentioned Whole Mobile in Italy.
Yes.
How did the organisation go about devaluing that information?
Yeah, so pretty much look, all of us, for the organisations we work with, will suffer from incidents and cyber attacks, right? It's what Melissa says, it's not if, it's when it's going to happen. Ideally, you try to keep those events out of the public domain. You're liaising with regulators if necessary, but behind the scenes and with the law enforcement, you're trying to keep things out of the public domain for various reasons, right? To protect your customers, the organisational reputation, whatever it might be. So in this decision with Home Mobile, that yes, the threat actor was selling data across the dark web, it might be that we took the position not to say anything or comment, which is usually the case, to not say anything or to comment. But in this case, we went very public with the details and what was taken and what was happened. We were very transparent deliberately, so then nobody would really want to buy it. Because what happens on the dark web and on these forums, all these people are like, oh no, there's too much stuff in the media, Italian law enforcement are involved, the cops are all over it, so nobody wanted to touch it. So that's kind of devaluing the data, they don't want to buy it.
Yeah. An interesting question, Slido, that kind of ties in with this again. It's looking at the obvious side of the coin. Do you feel the media and industry is too quick to tar and feather companies based on a breach occurring as opposed to their public response to the breach? Melissa?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically, what it says is, do you feel the media and industry is too quick to tar and feather companies based on a breach occurring as opposed to their public response to the breach?
Well, I hate saying it. I think it depends, but it kind of does, because I can't really speak for NBC Universal because that is not my role. That I don't do that thing. But I know we have a strict line that we have to, if we have, you were saying like don't speak. If somebody asks you something that's happening at your organization, even any organization I was in, like you do not say anything. You refer them to somebody else, and you don't say anything like, oh, well, what about? Again, this has not happened, but I'm just saying, like, if someone's like, what about the Disney hack? And you just don't say anything because you don't want to be put in that situation, because there is kind of being like a good net neighbor. It's like, even though you might be a competitor, it's just being a nice person. And, that could be you tomorrow. And that's why it's also important to have like a good communication with, like, they have like ISACs, where like financial ISACs, where all the financial people will get together and they talk about like what they're experiencing, what their pain points are, to try and help. They are eventually competitors, but it's to help each other out, because again, you don't want to be that person the next day.
Yeah, and to add on to for the question, my ask would be, particularly for people in this cyber technology community, be sympathetic to the organisation that's going through that attack, because right, how hard those teams are working, what they're going through. They didn't ask for those things to happen, right? It might be that poor one employee who has clicked on that link, right, and made a mistake. But the repercussions of that, they might be going through an organisational crisis. So be sympathetic is what I would say, particularly to this community. And there's that anecdote. It's like nobody asked for someone to break into their house. So yeah, I think sometimes it is a little bit unfair, particularly when it happens to large corporations. There's people behind there. Just remember the people is what I would say as well.
But do you not think there's a flip side to it in terms of lessons learned? I understand the sensitivity behind it, but if it's a brand new breach or a brand new attack, if that business doesn't share how that attack took place, then others can't benefit from that same that same sort of protection.
Yeah,
it's a fine line, I understand.
Yeah, it's really difficult, and I think I've been part of incidents where you really want to share, but maybe you're not in a position because there's a potential for litigation, or there might be like severe regulatory investigation, and you're not able to. And some of those investigations last for years, right? So you're not able to at the time as much as you do want to. So, like I say, you just never truly know what's going on.
Yep.
There's been a couple of references, from this table to terrorism, and you don't deal with terrorists, etc. It's almost a sort of given in counter-terrorism that you have to be lucky every single time. In order to neutralise that threat or prevent whatever it is happening, you have to be lucky every single time. The terrorists, however, Andy, only have to be lucky once. And there's really no way around that, particularly, as you've just said, Sonia, if you've got legislation or circumstances that means you cannot discuss this, you cannot be agile, you cannot be open about this in a way that perhaps you might want to be, but you can't, just in terms of business or governance.
I'd say it comes down to so you talk about counter-terrorism, a lot of it is around understanding what the threat is. If you understand the threat, then you can understand what countermeasures to put in place. I think it's the same as cyber. I know it's very broad and it's not as simple as that. You need to understand what the threats are doing and how they're being developed, so therefore you can put the right countermeasures in place to protect yourself. You're right, I mean, yeah, someone's going to get hit at some point. Someone's probably being hit right now. Yeah. If someone really wants to get into your business, they'll find another way to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you talked about lessons learned, Andy, with the NHS, right? So I think it's this morning, NHS Scotland, they've been ransomwared again. I think it was, so, but, by that argument, you could say, well, the NHS should have learned from WannaCry. Well, it's not quite as simple as that. It's quite a complex problem in my view. And I think sometimes we might be in danger of attributing blame because we haven't learned lessons. I am sure NHS Scotland learned many lessons from WannaCry, but they're compounded by resource and all the things that we all know about. So I don't know, sometimes that it's not quite as simple as learning the lessons and being able to prevent things.
Implementing it is very hard.
Yeah.
It's like costs millions and millions of pounds.
Of course
to
it
do
does.
these things.
Of course it does, yeah.
But then there's also the cost that if they don't do that, now they're being breached again, they're going to have to find more budget.
And where does that come from? That's
Yeah, I understand. I'm not saying it's an easy answer to it, absolutely.
The best time to get change, though, is always after an incident. That's when the pocketbooks open up and everyone's like, how can we stop this? Like, well, if we would have just done preventative measures, we probably could have avoided this, but hindsight's 20/20.
We've been talking a lot this morning in terms of teams and, so-and-so does this and so-and-so does that and what have you. This has come in from Anonymous saying, my cybersecurity team consists of me and 2 apprentices. In regards to documentation, what methods or applications would you recommend to document tasks?
Well, it's like we have like a ticketing system. So the thing is it feels like every other organization has their own ticketing system. So that's how we do it. We have a ticketing system where we can prioritize, we can put all of the information that we need, and we can say, this is the stuff that we're working on today. And then based on potential battle rhythm changes, like, again, something gets dropped and we're like, hey, now we're moving that. Then we change our prioritize based on that. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. Tasks.
Any thoughts on it? The other 2?
You just use what you've got, really. You can be as crude as you like or technologically advanced as you
Use
like.
an AI chatbot.
This is an indication of how basically little I understand of this, I suspect. But can AI create truly novel, innovative, new malware? Or can it just recycle what's there before?
There are platforms out there that will create new pieces of malware for you based on what you tell it to do or ask it to do.
But you have to ask it first.
Yeah. But then, who knows, right? Maybe in 5 years' time, there'll be an 8th generation of AI where it can do it all by himself. Maybe it will be like Terminator. I mean, I know it sounds a bit far-fetched and stuff, but look how far we've gone in 5, 10 years of using AI. So I would say anything is potentially possible. It's evolving all the time, right?
Okay. Any other questions from the floor? Oh. Right at the front here, so can you just wait for the microphone, please, because otherwise everybody else won't hear it. They still won't hear it.
A question for Melissa. I'm just interested, as a threat hunter, I would not be a good threat hunter, but you probably are. And when you get to that query that you think it's good enough for an alert, how oiled is the process between you finding a query and that query resulting in kind of a SOC use case?
So we do we're trying to do a lot of validation to make sure that when we submit a ticket to our detection team to turn this into an alert, that it has a high enough fidelity. So we do our own querying we take that query, and again, we do that back end, like 90-day query to make sure that, anything that is found is a true positive. And then once we are, I would say 75 to 85% confident that we're at that level, we will then submit that to detections. Now, that being said, I have written many a good query where there's just too much noise. So I think actually the scripting going out to the internet is a great example of just the network is too big and too varied that I couldn't actually make this a detection. So I have a dashboard. In our SIM, I have a dashboard where I can go and say, these are all the queries that I have. And I think I actually had it in the hunting source as basically, I call it passive hunting, where I just every morning, I'll take a look at all my dashboards of queries that didn't quite cut the mustard to be turned into an alert, but I'll find, and that's actually how we found some potential ransomware getting ready to be deployed onto our cloud, was me going through our dashboard. So it's got some good value, but the problem is it still takes a human, or potentially AI, to take a look at that and say, this doesn't look right based on the language that I've been given. So, does that answer your question?
What's the threshold there for it to be something that you do to something that it could be in a SOC use case list?
Yeah, so we base it by, how often will this trigger a false positive? If we say, it's hard to give it a number, but it's like, if you see 2 alerts over 30 days, we're like, okay, this is probably, but everything else has been a true positive. We're like, okay, I think the SOC can probably handle that error level. And we put that in the notes when we submit it to them. And then and we can also obviously go back, and if it's too loud, we can then do a filter request where then we can say we need to fix this query. And we have gotten ones that have been kicked back to us and said this isn't going to work. And so I'll say, so either we fix it or I make it a dashboard. Usually what I do.
I said right at the beginning of today that there's no fire alarm test scheduled for today. If a fire alarm went off just now, everybody would know what to do. They would get up and they would walk out and that would be fine. However, if something weird happens, what do they do then? I mean, the point I'm getting at here, something is going wrong. At what stage do you stop observing and actually start doing? How do you gauge that? How do you know when you know enough?
So I call it this, well, it's not really something, it's the spider sense, the spidey sense. It starts to tingle and you're like, something here just doesn't really feel right. But a lot of the times is, since we have a 24/7 SOC, I'm usually actually engaging with them via our messaging system well before I've actually generated that ticket. So I say, hey, I'm looking at this and this seems very, very weird. And then they usually actually start to do some preliminary research even before I even start to do anything. And then by the time I'm like, nope, that's it, this is definitely bad, they're actually 90% of the way with me anyway. So then the escalation is just more of a formality to then put it into the ticketing system so then it can be, actioned on immediately.
I'm with Melissa. I've learned go with your gut. Many cybersecurity professionals are extremely clever and see a lot of things. And, there's been times where I think, it just doesn't feel or look right. Not based on much, but you just kind of have that sense. Don't know where it comes from. But.
This ties in because what you've both just said there is it's based, well, not just based on gut instinct, that something's happening at the back of your brain based on all the experiences you've had and all the training you've had and all the knowledge that you have. However, there is a global shortage of IT professionals. Can AI, there's a question on Slido, I'm paraphrasing again, can AI make good that deficit in numbers? Because it doesn't have that gut instinct.
I think there are certain processes that you can automate that AI can come in and help with. I think you'll always need human beings for certain things, but I think in the interests of time, I think you could reduce the number of human beings that you do need. Yeah, it's in certain roles, not every single role. That's what I
think it would help certain things rise to the top. Yeah. So if you have petabytes of data, right, and it then starts to know what, again, if you know normal, you can easily find abnormal, but I think AI and machine learning is really good at helping to normalize, and all of a sudden they see that one blip, and they're like, it might not know if that's good or bad, but it can say, hey, user, I saw this blip, is this normal YN? And then you can say yes, and then, okay, I'll train it to then think that's normal, or say, no, okay, I'm going to escalate it.
Been really interesting. Can I ask you to thank our first 3 speakers one more time, please? Thank you.